Hey, what's shaking, everybody? Luke Dancy here, and today is a very special day. I have a historian of magic. I have a legendary figure in our industry. This guy has created magic. He's worked with some of the biggest names on the magic scene. I'm going to give you a list of at least a few of the people here in just a moment. It is my pleasure. It is my honor. I am so humbled today to be joined by a true living legend of magic, Mr. Jim Steinmeyer. How we doing, sir?
Thank you, Luke. It's great to be here.
Oh
I don't know
man.
if I'm going to live up to that introduction, but
I mean, you're
I'll do my best.
your list is a who's who. You've already done that. Your legacy is cemented for many, many, many years to come. So, thank you, first of all, for doing this. I know that you are a very talented man. You do a lot of different things for a lot of people. So, thanks for finding a little bit of time to spend with us today,
Oh,
sir. It's very much appreciated.
my pleasure. My pleasure. Absolutely.
Yeah. To kick things off, actually, I didn't ask you this before we started. Where are you coming to us from? Where are you at today? Where are you out there?
I'm in Burbank,
Perfect.
Southern California.
Nice. All right. So you're near my buddy David Regal. David's out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In Burbank. Yeah.
Cool, man. All right.
The other corner of Burbank. Yeah.
Very nice. All right. So as I did say earlier, guys, Jim Steinmeyer has worked with, consulted for, created magic for the likes of David Copperfield, Doug Henning, Siegfried and Roy, Ricky Jay, Orson Welles, which I'm actually excited to ask you about Orson Welles. That's kind of cool too. Harry Blackstone, and one of my favorites. I mentioned this to you before. The Walt Disney Imagineering company, like their division of Imagineering, which to me is just I'm geeking out on that already because I'm a huge Disney fanatic. So yeah. And of course, you've also created a lot of products. We're going to talk about some of that too. Obviously, you've got a new release that just hit too. But Jim Steinmeyer, to kind of go back to the basics here, where did this all start for you? Do you have like an engineering background? Like, how did you get to be so plugged into being creative with magic of all things?
Well, so simple answer to that is no engineering background.
Okay.
I was I grew up in Chicago, and there was a great magic community in Chicago. Uh, Primarily, like all that stuff, it comes from the local magic shop and then the clubs. And of course, we had a fantastic shop, which was Magic Incorporated. And we had Jay and we had Fran, and Vic Torsberger was a friend of mine, and Kim Felix, who was a contemporary of mine who worked at the shop. So there was a really strong magic community in Chicago. And I grew up in the middle of that. And I was I did shows. I did shows through college. And I was not, I would say around high school, I started working with other performers
Okay.
who were doing illusion shows or were doing other shows. And I was stage managing for them or assisting them or coming up with new material for them. And of course, what I realized is they were really good performers, meaning the translation is better performers than I was. So I had a real opportunity because I got to do kind of better shows by working with more talented magicians and doing the technical aspect for them. So it was a great invitation for me to develop that side of what I was doing. And I love doing it. So I have a number of performers in Chicago. And then after college, I worked for Doug Henning. I was hired by Doug Henning. I had freelance material to him. And he offered me a full-time job, and then I worked for him for 6 years in Southern California, and then Imagineering after that, and of course another bunch of magicians in the process of all of that too.
Wow. So would you say that getting connected with Doug Henning was kind of the first start of opening some doors for you? Because obviously a company like Disney isn't just going to take notice to just any person out there. Was it kind of the affiliation with Doug?
No.
Yeah.
Well, you're completely right. And the reason Disney knew me is because I had been there with Doug Henning. Doug had done a seminar for them.
Got it.
And I was there. I wasn't an active part of it, but I was there because I was an employee of Doug's and I was helping plan it.
Cool.
And so when Doug retired and dissolved his company, I got a call from the folks at Imagineering, and they said, "We heard that the company's been dissolved, and are you available for work?" Which surprised me. But that was what they used to do, is they used to keep track of people and who was available to them.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I might have missed this part, but how did you actually get connected to Doug Henning to start? Was it through some of the things you were doing in Chicago? Was there a connection there? Or how did you get connected to Doug Henning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had worked with a number of illusionists and performers in Chicago,
Mhm.
like Bob Higa, who was doing fantastic shows and doing corporate shows, and I was developing new material. And one of the tricks that I worked on, I took photos of it. This was in the old days. You know, you took photos and then you put them in an envelope and you put a stamp on it. And I went to Jay Marshall and I said, "Hey, what should I do with this? Should I send this to Doug Henning and see if if he's interested in performing this trick?"
Wow.
And Jay went, "Yeah, of course you should." So I sent it an envelope, you know, on a wing and a prayer, as they would say back then, and got a call a couple weeks later from Doug Henning and said, "Yeah, I'm interested in this." And he arranged a meeting. He was coming up through the Midwest, and I came to see a show in Milwaukee and put this illusion in the car and drove it up and showed him. And it's not the first thing of mine that he did or performed on television, but it was my foot in the door. And then I started freelancing him material after that.
Wow. So literally just taking a chance, sending something blindly and just
the best advice I got about that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Yeah, I mean, Doug Henning, a legend. If you guys haven't, I know we have younger viewers as well that watch this stuff. Doug definitely seemed to pioneer magic, especially when it started hitting Broadway. Magic had never really been just a single thing, unless I'm mistaken. I know you're a historian. You go much further back in the magic history than I do. He was pretty much the one that got magic like to be taken seriously on such a major place like Broadway. Is that right?
I would say that's right. I mean, there were magicians that had worked on Broadway, but
right.
but that show made a huge impact in 1974, and I worked with him after that. But then right after that were the television specials, and he developed a tremendous amount of new material and really innovative material for those television shows, and was interested in new material. He was very actively intrigued by new material, and not every magician is like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that and I appreciate it, but Doug wanted new ideas. I mean, he was very creative himself, and he responded well, and he was really intrigued with new ideas and kind of new presentations, and he wanted to hear about that stuff. And I would say that that's really what propelled those shows back then in the 70s. Doug and David, they were really actively looking for new material.
Yeah. And it only makes sense then that you did some work with David, because obviously Doug was Broadway. Yep. David started kind of going down the same path, and then everything, kind of blurred the lines there for a little bit with Doug. Actually, how much of a gap was there between Doug and David? Because I know there was like a transition period there, but was it like from 1 year to the next?
Oh, no. There was a lot of overlap. I can't say how many years, but there was I would say a rivalry. I say that, as a guy who worked for the other guy, worked for Doug. We used to watch David's special, and we would hear about it because everyone was LA based at that time.
Okay.
And we all knew each other. I used to have lunch at John Gaughan's shop, and Don Wayne would be there, and Alan Wakeling would be there, who worked for Mark Wilson. So, we would all kind of hear about what's going on and hear what was in the works. But yeah, there was a friendly rivalry at that time. Yeah, there were the big dinosaurs squaring off opposite each other. And they were nicer guys than that, but there was a certain feeling of that. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the dinosaurs. It's only fitting now that David has a dinosaur in his show.
I always say that the illusionists are the dinosaurs of the magic.
Meaning
that they're when the asteroid hits.
Yep.
They're the first ones that hit the ground, and the marsupials doing card tricks will survive for a long time. But the dinosaurs need a big food chain in order to make that stuff work. Yeah.
And guys, just tuning in, I'm speaking with the legend, Mr. Jim Steinmeyer today. So if you guys have any questions for him, we're going to talk about more of his history and also some of his products as well. But one thing I would like to ask you, a very honest question, because I live in Las Vegas. I don't know if I had mentioned that to you earlier, but I see the magic scene, and obviously there's the David Copperfield, there's the Chris Angel, kind of the big illusionist guys. The thing that blows my mind, and I have a lot of respect for the guy I'm about to name, so don't take this the wrong way, Then you have like Shin Lim, who
Mhm.
is in the same building that arguably the biggest production that Vegas had ever seen, Siegfried and Roy. He's in the same building doing close-up magic for the most part. Like with David starting to get closer to the end of his run year after year, and Chris isn't getting any younger either. Real talk here. Do you think that that style of magic is starting to become the dinosaur, is starting to become the extinct thing that, due to the cost of it, due to the scale of it, do you think that we're seeing the end of a true era of stage magic in Las Vegas in particular? I'd love to hear
Oh,
your thoughts on that.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I would say as a guy who writes history books is everything is a cycle. All that stuff happens like that all the time.
Yeah.
And it happened in the past.
Okay.
It happened in the 30s, in the early 30s, and into the 40s, and then into the early 50s. There was almost nothing. There was almost no market for illusions in the United States. So it's a fashion. I always say to magicians, it's a fashion, and to some extent, magicians should have to realize that some of that is self-imposed in the industry. Women's skirts get short, and then they get long, and then they get short again, and then they get long again, because they have to sell you new skirts. And the performers that I know that are still doing illusions, and there aren't many, their audiences really love it. Yeah. Now they're not doing it like we did in the 80s. They're not doing it with some kind of driving rock score and pulsing lights and
yeah,
mylar curtains and all that stuff that you see on YouTube. Yeah. Illusions have changed in terms of presentation, and they have to keep doing that. All that stuff has to keep evolving. Yeah. But audiences still appreciate seeing that. But it's a kind of self-imposed thing in the industry. What's hot right now is close-up and manipulation, and you know what? That's fantastic. Yeah. All that stuff has to go away a little bit, be rethought, and come back. But illusions they'll never completely go. I talked about a time when they were pretty much gone, but there were still illusionists performing at that time, and it's going to present a challenge to people to redo it differently and to come back. And performers I'm working with, we're doing that right now, developing new material, and it's successful. So it isn't the same demand, but it'll come back again.
Yeah, it's something I've definitely thought a lot about, because as someone that grew up watching like the Copperfields and even some of the later Henning stuff, like, man, I would hate to see that not be able to be enjoyed and experienced by future generations of magicians, because like I even watch the old stuff now. I go back and I watch it. I just remember, how fun it was to watch that scale of magic and how theatrical it was at the same time,
Yeah, I mean, I would say, just to come back to exactly the point you made, when I was a teenager, I would see the occasional illusion show on stage. But, those shows were, Disembodied Princess and Oz Levitation, and Substitution Trunk, and, you can imagine what they were. And to turn that television on and to see Doug Henning do stuff where you go, oh my God, I have no idea where that stuff came from. What is that? And remember, that was right around the era when Harbin was really innovating, and that book was out. So suddenly to have the door kicked open on this incredible rush of new material was really powerful and very influential. And it's just a reminder to everybody, including magicians today, that, that kicking that door open to new material has a big impact on an audience. It starts new trends. It starts new thinking. It starts new fashions in magic. And that's what happened when I was a teenager and watched Doug Henning and David Copperfield. And yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Transitioning, as you're talking about, things adapting and evolving, I guess is the word I'm looking for. There's a good question that just came in, and we don't have to stick too long on this if you don't want to, because I know we have limited time. But Nigel does have a good question. He said, Luke, would be interested to hear Jim's view on social media magic. I know it's a hot topic. Obviously, everyone's still kind of quarantined and not able to perform live shows. What are your thoughts on this social media trend or vibe that's going on right now?
Well, so So I hear a fair amount about it. I wouldn't claim to be sitting on the knife's edge of it, but I do hear a lot about it because a lot of friends of mine are successful in it. Mm-hmm. And of course, I hear about it because of the impossibilities stuff that I've done.
Yep, we're going to
the books I published that are where that material is really being used.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm so grateful that that has found audiences. And I would say that I have seen more of my material in the last year performed than I've seen in the previous 30 years.
Whoa! Wow.
Now, you know what those tricks are. They're not. Those aren't illusions, but I really have seen a huge amount of material performed, and it's really interesting seeing it performed. So here's a couple things I would say. I would say these shows are not ever going to go away completely. Mm-hmm. We're all waiting for the time to do real live shows in person again, and I know a certain number of magicians who just don't want to do these social media shows. They say, as a friend of mine says, that's not what I signed up for. I don't really want to do it, and I completely get it. It's a totally different thing, but it is a really different product. It's a completely different product, those shows. And what I would say is the biggest disappointments I've seen are magicians who kind of think, well, I'll turn a camera on and do my show now.
Yeah, right.
And that is not what that show is. That is not what that show is. And I've also learned, fortunately, by being able to watch these shows and see the material used, people process that stuff differently watching it. It's very weird because some of these interactive pieces, some of these, one-on-one pieces, we've used live in live shows with specific presentations, and they've been really successful. Some of the impossibilities material. It's really different in a live show than it is on a Zoom call. The attention span on a Zoom call is not the same. People, there's something about being in your home and having your phone and a little level of distraction around you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not the same as sitting with 100 people in a dark theater paying attention. And so I've learned a lot about kind of what works and what you want those things to connect to the audience. And I would say it's a really different art. It's not just about putting that stuff on a Zoom call. Those are really different shows. And the good ones are different shows.
Yeah. I've also been showing a couple of these as you've been chatting. I think you've seen them as well. A few of the impossibilities, which I would assume that, you mentioned that a lot more people are performing your stuff now. I would assume a lot of it's coming from these resources that I'm showing right now. Would that be correct?
I would say that's right. The last one that was published is actually called Virtual Impossibilities. And it's the only one where I kind of made an effort to put their only virtual effects in it. All the tricks can be done virtually and also can be done live, of course. Yep. The series, just by happenstance, always had a certain number of virtual effects in it ever since the first one. So it was a series of books that always had these kind of tricks that could work over media. But in the last year, obviously, there became a real need for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Things have definitely changed a lot with magic, but it's been kind of interesting to watch magicians adapt. It didn't take them long, did it, to really
jump? You know what? Magicians they don't get respect in show business, and they don't get respect in the industry, but they really are the heavy lifters in this business. And they were the first ones kind of out of the gate early to be able to put these shows together and to be able to reach people and to be able to interact with people and intrigue people in a very economical way. It's not like you can't have a singing concert on Zoom, but it isn't what happened right away. Magicians stepped up to the plate and they did a really fantastic job.
Yeah, jumped right on in. Absolutely.
Yeah.
My buddy Mike Miller's watching. I want to say hello to Mr. Mike. He heard a rumor. Maybe we could get a little info on this. He says, I heard Jim wants to go to Abbott's this year. Is that true? Are you interested in going to Abbott's Magic Convention? The get together.
I did. You know what? I didn't. About last year, I was talking to some people last year about what was happening with Abbott's, and so I talked to them. I talked to a couple people that were involved, and it isn't surprising that it got to Mike because obviously he's integrally involved in that and has always been a huge component of that, of kind of what was happening and when do you think you'd be back. And I think in the course of it, I'd say, I'd like to go sometime. I don't have any plans right now for the summer and what I'm doing. I just had a project that might kick into that that time period. But yeah, I would love to go back. And if Abbott's comes back this year, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, it's been weird not having magic convention.
I know, but you know what? We just got to get it right.
Oh, I know. Trust me, I totally understand that. Yeah, we'll get there eventually. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the people on the list that I mentioned were Siegfried and Roy, the duo, who I honestly cannot believe we've lost them both within a 1 year time span. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
There was a good question that came in from Matt. Literally, his name says from Matt. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Siegfried. I suspect that he was a better magic thinker than maybe he was given credit for.
Yeah. So Matt has said exactly the right thing.
Okay.
One of the sad things is that Siegfried will be remembered culturally as, one of those flashy Vegas magicians with the cats in the cage and in the sequined outfits stomping around on stage. And that was an era and that was a fashion, and they were part of it, and they were brilliant at it. But that's a little unfair that they'll be lumped in with a lot of people that followed them and copied them. They were really smart performers. And Siegfried was really, really intuitive about what he did as a magician, and was really smart about what he did. I don't consider myself to have been really close associates of theirs. I worked with them closely on several projects, including some television shows. They would call me in for special stuff because their regular team, wasn't necessarily, ready to just do a television show and stuff like that.
Sure, that's a big thing.
They would call me in for special material. But they were really smart, and I saw them in operation, and they were both incredibly knowledgeable about what they did. And Siegfried was really a deep thinker about magic. Cool. He was quiet, and he was philosophical, and he wasn't a guy, I think, who would have lectured magicians or would have stood up at a convention and talked about it. But it's really a shame, because when you got him talking about what influenced him, it was really surprising, the stuff that he told you about how deeply he thought about magic and how much he understood what a magician is doing for an audience. So I was really fortunate to have worked with him and gotten a taste of that.
Nice. Yeah. Rest in peace to both of the boys. I mean, geez, it's a shame.
They changed. We will never see a show like that in our lifetime. Will we ever see a show like that ever again? I don't know, but it's going to be a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one legend after another, man. I guess that's the one thing we learn as we get older. We start seeing more and more of the people that we love and admire start to say goodbye to us. It's a sad thing.
Yeah, and it's about putting it all in context of kind of what we learned from and what we took away from that. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to jump into one quick thing, and then I want to jump into some Disney talk, if that's okay with you. I know that you've been a big part of working with Disney, and I'm excited to learn more about that myself. Before we do that, I want to jump into one more product thing, because this just dropped. The Chameleon Skin Wallet. The trailer has been out there, and some people have been talking about it, and sometimes trailers are kind of tough for people to see what an effect is. It all depends on the way that they're shot and done, and especially now with people not being able to have live performances, it becomes even more challenging, to try to grab. This one's interesting though, because was it Magic or Genie that you were publishing on a regular basis ideas and principles that you were just giving away? Like, which one was it, or was it both?
Well, right now it's Genie, and it used to be Magic. I did a series. I did a series in Magic called Conjuring, and now I'm doing it in Genie.
Okay.
And Magic at that time I did it monthly, and I did Genie monthly. Now Richard has a lot of really great columnists. Unfortunately, I can do it every other month.
Okay.
But it's a funny story. I did Magic for years, and then stopped, and Magic kept running. And when Stan did the last issue of Magic, he asked if I would do one more Conjuring column for them. And if you create Magic, if you are involved in any process like that, there are some things that you just get really great ideas for right away. You kind of like see the whole project. Someone says a title to you, or you imagine a title, or you think of something and you go, I know exactly what that trick is supposed to be. And that's good news and bad news. That's how I always feel about that. It's good news because you envision it perfectly right up front, and it's fantastic. And that's often what keeps you from realizing the trick. And one of the things I always had notes for, that I always carried through when I was making notes for Magic Magazine of possible columns, was something called the Chameleon Skin Wallet, because it's such a great, there it is right there, right? You have a wallet that's made out of chameleon skin, and so it changes color to match whatever you're wearing. And, that's like, there's the plot right there. It's just perfect. Everything about it is perfect. And it was a trick I never found a good method for in the years that I did conjuring. I just was never satisfied, because I had imagined it kind of so perfectly that I could never achieve it. But in the meantime, when I stopped doing it, I kept thinking about it. And when Stan contacted me and said, "Would you do one more column?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do the one that I could never figure out at the time." So it was in the last issue of Magic Magazine, and fortunately, Paul Romani contacted me and said, "Have you ever done anything with that?" Because he said, "I had one made up, and it really works beautifully." I had, of course, made one up in cardboard when I did the column. So Paul had this beautiful real leather wallet made that handles beautifully, and it's a really great routine. Paul used to put it in his pocket, still does, I guess, puts it in his back pocket, uses it as a real wallet, walks around with it, and uses it occasionally during the day, performs it. So anyway, it's a really nice product, and it's really Paul's product. He just asked if I'd be all right with him putting it out.
Cool.
And he did a fantastic job with it. It's a wallet that changes 4 different colors, and it has the nice little piece in it is like it's brown and black, and it changes to match what you're wearing. And when you put money on the inside of it and you close the wallet's now green because it's touched the money.
Yeah.
And so there's all little bits like that. And at the end, of course, you touch it to your tie or something you're wearing, and it changes red.
Yeah. And as someone put it, Jesse said, I love that wallet. I would just every day carry it and mess with people, because it's an everyday wallet. You can literally keep your stuff in there when you're ready. You literally never leave home without a magic trick on you.
I was kind of surprised, because what I didn't realize when I had written it up, as Paul told me, is he said, "It's just a wallet. It's a real wallet." So he said, "I just put my credit cards in it and my money, and bang, I walk around with it." So yeah, it's great. He did a great job with it.
It's no wonder that Vortex Magic was all over you guys about that one, So yeah, very, very cool stuff. Now it is time, my favorite time. I know we're already almost hitting 30 minutes here. I would really love to talk about the Disney Imagineering stuff, because guys out there, if you don't know, one of the big things that Jim Steinmeyer has been known for over the years is the Pepper's Ghost. I've got his book on it right there in the middle, The Science Behind the Ghost. As I was talking to Jim earlier, the early work from the Haunted Mansion does use the Pepper's Ghost, but you have since taken this Pepper's Ghost principle. You've got it patented, actually, the new work on it, which is pretty cool. I think you have 4 illusion patents, if I'm not mistaken, in general. Is that right?
You know what? I'm kind of not sure. That's about it.
I grabbed that from your website.
Okay, yeah. Well, then that's probably right. But there was a ghost patent that was a application of using it with video that we had used. We actually used in Disney in one spot, and I've used several times. Cool. But yeah, the original Haunted Mansion was all done before I started working with them, and I was really fortunate to work with a number of the original guys that put that in.
Wow.
So I talked to them about where that all came from and how they developed it and what the stories were, and that was fascinating. But I did not actually work on the Haunted Mansion. I just had a chance to work with the original guys, and then I worked a little bit with Pepper's Ghost in other applications in the park.
Very cool. But the new work that you have on it, is it being used with Disney, if you're at liberty to say? Because I know that I think it was on your website. Let me go back again, and we'll look at this together. It says here that you have you have 4 U.S. patents in the field of illusion apparatus, including a new version of the famous Pepper's Ghost mystery, which makes it applicable in a variety of situations. So, have any of those situations been with Disney? If I can ask that.
Oh, were any of those applications with Disney? Yes. And it's no longer there.
Sorry.
It was a show. It was a show that was at Epcot.
Okay.
And it was in for several years in Epcot, and we used this application. It was an application that has increased sight lines, has better sight lines.
Okay.
Because of how we combined it. So yeah, it's been used in a number of different shows. It was actually used at we used at a concert at Radio City Music Hall to do a Ghost of Frank Sinatra. And it was used for Disney, but it wasn't developed specifically for Disney, and it was used while I was working there. Yeah.
Cool. The involvement that you have, is there anything recent that they've done or that they are doing that you're at liberty to speak of that you're involved in now, or maybe within the last 5 years? Any recent work with Disney that you're able to talk about?
The most recent stuff I've done with Disney is for their live theater divisions.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Not necessarily Imagineering. I mean, I've been called into a couple of meetings in Imagineering. It happens every once in a while, but most of the stuff I've done for Disney in recent years has been for their Broadway division, and they're remounting right now a new production of Beauty and the Beast, which will probably be in the next year, depending on schedules. And so that's what I've been working on. I did Mary Poppins and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast with Disney, and did the illusions for those effects for those shows.
And as I mentioned earlier to you before we went live, I was asking about the connection between getting to Disney, and I think that you mentioned that the connecting dot for you was back to Doug Henning, who we were talking about earlier. Do you maybe want to kind of mention how those pieces kind of connected, because that's a pretty interesting thing.
I was working for Doug at the time out here in California. I worked for him for 6 years, and Doug was asked to come into Disney and give a talk about magic. And he did. He came in and did a seminar. It was a 2-day seminar for Imagineering about magic and kind of his approach to it. Taught some magic and used it as examples. And because I was working with him, I was kind of along for the ride. I really wasn't part of the seminar, but I went to meetings with him when they were planning it, so I could kind of interface with Disney, and I was there when he was presenting it, and I kind of brought stuff and helped set stuff up, as you do when you're an employee. And when Doug retired, Disney contacted me, and they said, "Hey, we noticed that Doug is no longer has a viable company, and are you available for work?" And it was kind of one of those things where I thought, well, how did you know my name? I mean,
right.
They did, but all I was one of the guys with Doug Henning.
That's cool.
So I went in for an interview and was hired as an Imagineer. They were expanding the company because they had a number of big projects coming up, and so I got a job. It was fantastic.
Nice. Don't know if you noticed this or not, but I actually wore this as a tribute to you today. Social illusion, because I know you're all about the illusions and all the good stuff. So yeah, I had to throw on my Steinmeyer, my little tribute thing here. So speaking of illusions and duos of magic, I know we mentioned Siegfried and Roy, but there's another one that Amazing Productions brought up on YouTube. He said he just finished the complete Jarrett, and that you mentioned Devant and Jarrett almost worked together. Are there any other dream teams that almost were? Or teams that you would have liked to have seen? So when it comes to magicians kind of teaming up, were there any other ones that almost were?
Oh, that's really, there's something I never really thought about.
Cool, yeah.
That is a really intriguing story, that Devant and Jarrett almost worked together. And you could see the egos of both of them screwed up. Morit tried very hard to work directly with Houdini. He did consult with him, but Morit wanted to actually team up and do a show together, and that would have been really interesting. It wouldn't have worked, but it would have been a really fascinating show. It's a really good question. I mean, because I think there's a lot of opportunities, because those people are constantly kind of coming together and intermixing. As I said to you, we used to have lunch all the time, at John Gaughan's shop, and Don Wing would be there, and he'd be talking about David Copperfield, and Alan Wakeling would talk about what they're doing at Mark Wilson's, and I would talk about what we're doing at Doug Henning's. And, we all existed on a different level than the other dinosaurs did. So it was fun, and all those things. There was a lot of cross-pollination with all those ideas. So I think there's a lot of missed opportunities of people that almost work together.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, that like with magicians, how it only seems like at one time, at least as of recent times, there can only really be one or two maybe big names at the same time. Is it like this quote unquote God complex where there can only be like one person that is like the all powerful magician? It's an interesting thing because we don't see a lot of them at the same time, like a lot of big names. It's usually one, maybe two, kind of floating around.
Well, there was a great tradition for a long time that was how it was in America, that there would be one magician. I mean, those were the days, those were the days of Thurston and Blackstone. People used to say that America would really only accept one as the great magician. And then there were others kind of trailing them, but then there would always be kind of one that had that role. And I don't know what to say. I think it's a little more, I hope it's true that it's a little more interesting market now. I say that because there clearly isn't, a role for just kind of one guy doing it. But I think that what becomes interesting is that you get people like, Matt Franco and Shin Lim and Chris Angel and David Copperfield. And, people kind of understand that they're doing things differently, that it isn't just that there's one magician, that there are kind of different approaches to magic and different attitudes about it. And they accept that there are different performers for that. And I hope that that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it's definitely interesting to see magic as it is now. And it'll be interesting to see how it continues to evolve, over time. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. And, I want to say once again, thank you for your time today as we start to wrap things up here. I don't want to keep you too much longer. The timeline, I know that Phil said this, and I don't know if I missed it. He said, wow, another Impossibilities book so soon. Great. Was he referring to the virtual one, or do you have another one that I missed? Because I've been keying up stuff behind the scenes.
Last year was the year of two Impossibilities,
okay.
Which was really crazy, really, really crazy. But I was in the works with Curious Impossibilities, and I've never set a deadline and I've never set a schedule, and they just happen when they happen.
Okay.
But because of the interest in the virtual stuff, I had a number of notes, and it just was kind of the right time to just keep going. And so I'm sure he's referring to the fact that Curious and Virtual came out the same year. And there will be another one or two at least in the series, and I'm at work on one now, but there's no special schedule for it. It'll come out when it's ready.
Okay. And speaking of that, are you currently involved? I know I asked specifically about Disney, but are you currently involved in any theatrical shows? Anything that you can talk about now that's keeping you busy, during these strange times? Because I know everyone's doing different. People are trying to perform online. People are trying to make the best of it. But like, are you currently plugged into anything yourself, not product wise, but like project wise, that you can maybe?
I mean, I'm working on, like I say, this show that will go to Broadway.
Right.
Working with a producer in the UK for a show that's being planned. That's going to have a fair amount of original magic in it. Cool. And I am working, as always, with 2 or 3 performers on material for their shows, and a couple book projects too. Nothing major right now in terms of books, but I've decided I've got to do an interesting book project to kind of get it out of my system, and that's what I'm kind of working on right now, and I'm going to be very happy when that's finished.
Okay. And I have one more question for you before I let you go, if that's okay. Just one more.
Yeah.
For those out there that are interested to learn more about the history of magic, you are a historian, you have a lot of respect for the art, and I would like to pass that along to more people. What type of resources would you recommend for people to look at, or maybe, look into if they want to learn more about the history of magic? Like, are there any type of books or online resources or anything that you could kind of steer people towards if they want to learn more about some of that history, the rich history that we have for the art of magic?
I think it's really, I'm biased. I think it's really a value because it's kind of amazing hearing about things that were done and understanding the way those people worked. And what I would say, I mean, I know this sounds kind of weird and mystical and, slightly crazy. Now that I live in California, I get to say that stuff. But I would say that, when I work on that stuff, I feel really, I get to a point where I kind of know these people. If you spend enough time with Morit, you begin to understand how he thinks. If you spend enough time with Jarrett, you begin to understand how he invented magic. If you spend enough time with Devant, even though he writes sometimes differently about how his approach worked, when you really spend time with his creations, you begin to realize how Devant worked and what he was doing. And I always say, do people analyze, great painters, and do they look closely at their brushwork, and can they tell you how Leonardo da Vinci painted a painting? And the answer is yes. There are people that do that. There are people that are obsessive that way, and they do that. And that's really kind of what this is. It's an understanding of how these people worked and how they thought, and how they viewed their opportunities and what they did with their opportunities during their career. So yeah, I think it's really fascinating. I would just say I've benefited a lot from understanding those guys. And I don't pretend to say I really understand them, but whatever insight I've gotten. So yeah, I've written a number of books. I would say that, don't neglect books like Milburn Christopher's Illustrated History of Magic, really brilliant book. That's a huge, fantastic overview of magic. I'm trying to think of some of the great books. Will Dexter's books, when I was a kid, it's so weird to say, but Will Dexter's books, he wrote the original book on Chung Ling Soo, The Riddle of Chung Ling Soo, which he had to leave a lot of the story out that I was later able to tell in The Glorious Deception. But he wrote a fascinating little book under dire circumstances. He was threatened to not publish certain things, and he did a fantastic job writing a brilliant book about it. So I think those are all great historical books worth reading.
Cool. Yeah. And I always like to kind of nudge that a little bit just to keep the history of magic alive, because none of us would be doing what we're doing without those greats that have come and gone. So
I think people will be surprised kind of the inspiration it gives you, what that thinking gives you. Because of course, what you want, all of us can think along the lines that we think about right now. When you're tunneled in doing card stuff, you have an understanding of, what your range is. And what's really hard is kicking that door open and seeing the way a guy is thinking in the 20s about stage magic, or the way a guy in the 40s is thinking about nightclub magic. And all of those are lessons and inspiration.
And one of your books that's interesting, it made me smile actually, as I start to go here, Hiding the Elephant. It was really cool to see that. I think it was in Barnes and Noble and major bookstores, and that's freaking cool, man. To have your stuff in a major bookstore like that, and magic-wise?
A number of those books were written for the public. I'd say Glorious Deception, Hiding the Elephant, Last Greatest Magician in the World, which is the biography of Thurston, which I think is no longer in print on my site, but I think you can find pretty easily. They're good. They're good stories, and those guys were great stories.
Yeah.
So if you get a chance, you would enjoy those. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go back here to this page. I want to make sure I get this quote right. As I start to wrap up with the person that the New York Times calls the celebrated invisible man. I like that, because you were the man behind the scenes. Someone mentioned earlier a little bit like Oz, like Wizard of Oz. You're the man behind the scenes, making everything happen. That's you. You're the guy behind the scenes that we all know about in the magic world, luckily. But the rest of the world, you're kind of that guy that just makes stuff happen, which is really cool, And not only an inventor of magic, a designer, he's worked on Broadway shows, and again, the list goes on and on. The magicians he's worked with over the years, guys, if you're just joining us, like David Copperfield, Doug Henning, Ricky Jay, Siegfried and Roy, Blackstone, goes on and on and on and on. And definitely, if you're just joining us now, make sure to watch the replay here in a little bit to learn more about Jim Steinmeyer, the living legend of magic. And we actually talked about some of his product stuff too. So Jim, thank you for your time today. I sincerely appreciate it. And it's been a treat for me to get to hear some of these stories, face to face with you. So thanks for the FaceTime. It's very much
absolutely. Thank you, Luke. Thanks for doing this.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. And from me and Mr. Jim Steinmeyer, stay safe out there. Keep working on that magic, and I will catch you all next time. See you guys. Take care out there.